The main square blazed with lights, as if an award show were about to begin. Giant screens glowed on every corner, spotlights swept across the sky, and a sea of people squeezed together, desperate for a glimpse of the city's biggest talent competition. It was one of those nights when everyone temporarily stepped off their pedestal just to witness who would become the next viral sensation. The line of contestants twisted along the right side of the stage. People dressed to impress, hair perfectly styled, makeup intact, glittering outfits, and the unmistakable attitude of someone born for the spotlight. Some warmed up their vocals, others rehearsed choreography, and the boldest were already chatting with influencers, live-streaming every second. The atmosphere pulsed with rivalry, inflated egos, and sky-high expectations. No one there seemed willing to share a single moment of attention, until everything shifted. An elderly man approached, shuffling slowly along the edge of the line. His clothes were worn thin, his beard untrimmed, hair tangled, shoes falling apart. His hollow eyes revealed nights spent outdoors, and his hesitant steps betrayed a body running on its final reserves. In his hand, he clutched a crumpled slip of paper, probably picked up off the ground, with a crooked number scribbled across it. Every head in line turned. At first, silence. Then the laughter began. A young man in a white hoodie pointed and spoke loudly enough for the crowd to hear, "Hey, old man, wrong line. The soup queue is on the other side of the square." More laughter. Phones lifted. People filmed, snapped pictures, delighted at what looked like a ready-made meme. The old man didn't flinch. He simply stepped to the end of the line and held the paper tighter. There was resolve in him, the kind that comes only from someone who has survived far worse humiliation. A woman nearby, live-streaming with a lapel mic, moved closer and shoved her camera near his face. "And you're here for what exactly?" she asked, wearing a smirk. He raised his eyes slowly, voice weak but steady. "I came to sing." She choked on her own giggle. "Sing? Here?" He breathed in deeply, as though gathering the last scraps of dignity he still possessed. "If I sing well, will you give me a plate of food?" The sentence dropped like a stone. For a moment, nobody laughed, nobody moved. Just an uncomfortable silence, the kind that forces people to confront a truth they pretend not to see. The live streamer tried to mask the discomfort with humor. "Sir, this is a professional show. The prize is money, fame, contracts, not charity." But the old man hadn't asked for charity. He'd proposed an exchange. He'd offered something, and he'd done it with dignity. "I just want to eat today, that's all," he said, with the quiet bluntness of someone who has nothing left to protect. The crowd laughed again, louder now, as if trying to drown out the guilt that honesty had stirred. A staff member rushed over, annoyed. "Sir, you can't stay here. This isn't a joke. That number you're holding isn't even from us." The old man lifted the trembling paper. "Someone gave it to me, said I could try." The producer snatched it from his hand. Just a scribble, a misshapen number, nothing official. "Who gave this to you?" he demanded. The man shrugged. Maybe nobody had. Maybe he found it on the ground. Maybe it was simply the last strand of hope in a merciless day. While they argued, a young woman in the audience raised her phone. "Guys, look at this," she whispered. "He only asked for food in exchange for singing. Look how they're treating him." The video spread through the crowd like a quiet spark. Someone forwarded it. Another sent it to a group chat. Within seconds it was circulating among the hundreds gathered there. The old man watched with unfocused eyes, as if he couldn't comprehend why so much chaos had erupted, just because he wanted a chance to sing. The staff insisted he leave. The contestants mocked him. The spectators filmed him. And he stood there, still, holding his breath, unaware that this exact moment would change his life, and the lives of everyone watching. Before the show even began, the commotion had turned into a spectacle of its own. The girl's video continued to spread like a silent wildfire. Comments flooded her screen in real time. "Let him sing! This is so wrong! Why is no one helping him? I want to hear his voice!" Meanwhile, two security guards approached the elderly man who held the crumpled paper as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. "Come on, sir, please," one of them said, reaching out to escort him away. Before the guard could touch him, a louder voice cut through the noise. "Wait!" It was the head coordinator. He carried a tablet, headphones hanging from his neck, and the stressed expression of someone juggling 10 crises at once. He looked the man up and down, measuring him against the polished, artificial shine of the event they were about to broadcast. "What's going on here?" he asked sharply. The livestream reporter stepped forward. "He wants to sing, says he's here to compete." The coordinator frowned. "With that paper?" he asked, pointing at the scribble in the man's hand. "He said someone gave it to him," the guard explained. The old man inhaled slowly, trying to stay composed. "I just wanted a chance." The simplicity of his request carried a strange power. It felt completely out of place in that environment where everyone fought for likes, exposure, and contracts. In the middle of so much ambition, a plea so basic almost sounded inappropriate. The entire line watched in silence, waiting for the outcome as if they were witnessing a live soap opera. The coordinator sighed and rubbed his temples. "This is going to throw off the schedule," he muttered. "And we can't just let anyone on stage. This is a professional show." The young woman who had filmed everything earlier stepped forward. "Professional is letting a starving man beg to sing for a meal? Do you have any idea how awful this looks?" A few spectators clapped softly. The coordinator saw the danger immediately. The situation had already slipped from his control. If he pushed the old man out now, it would become a scandal in minutes. He turned to an assistant. "How many audition spots are left?" "2," the assistant replied, checking his clipboard. The coordinator looked back at the old man. "Fine," he exhaled, clearly irritated. "Here's what we'll do. He goes in as the final participant. That avoids confusion. But if he slows us down, he's out." The line shifted restlessly. Complaints erupted. "That's not fair. I trained for months. You're seriously letting him in?" The coordinator silenced them with a harsh gesture. "No one asked for your opinion," he snapped. "The show goes on." The old man, hands trembling, offered a small nod of thanks. But the fight was just beginning. No sooner had he been allowed to stay than a producer grabbed the coordinator's arm, speaking in a low, furious whisper. "Have you lost it? This is a televised event. Our sponsors will freak out. He doesn't fit the profile. He doesn't look the part. He has nothing." The coordinator replied in the same tone. "And you want to be the one responsible for dragging out a starving old man while dozens of cameras are pointed at him?" The producer fell silent. They both knew that was the truth. Off to the side, the old man slowly lowered himself to the ground. He didn't have the strength to stand for long. He pulled his torn coat tighter around his frail body and held the registration slip as if it were the only thing giving him a place to belong. As he waited, he heard whispers that cut deeper than the cold. "People like that shouldn't be at these events. He just wants attention. He's going to ruin the show. He'll throw the whole stage off key." But there were also softer murmurs. "Poor man. He must be starving. Why hasn't anyone asked his name?" The young woman with the phone approached again. "Do you need water?" she asked. He smiled with the gentle expression of someone who isn't used to being treated kindly. "I just need a chance." An assistant returned and handed him an official form, a real one this time. "Here. Just so no one can say you weren't given an opportunity." He held the paper carefully, as though it were made of glass. And as the evening went on, a rumor began spreading backstage. "Do you think he can really sing?" Nobody knew, but social media was already betting that this old man would change the entire show, and they were about to learn how right they were. Hours passed, and the show reached its peak. Skilled singers, trained dancers, polished acrobats, comedians, magicians, each act battled for a reaction, a cheer, a tear, a burst of applause. The stage glowed, the judges smiled for the cameras, and the contestants performed with mechanical precision. Behind the curtain, the old man waited on a plastic chair offered by a sympathetic assistant. His worn coat hung off his thin frame, useless against the cold. His tired eyes stared at the floor, while his hands clutched the registration form like a lucky charm. Every time a new contestant was announced, he lifted his head slightly, and every time it wasn't him, he lowered it again. Producers whispered near the wings, monitoring the viral video that spread by the second. Almost 50,000 views in 15 minutes, one said. If he goes on stage, this is going to blow up, another replied. And what if he's terrible? Even better. People love a disaster. Cruelty was so normalized there that no one seemed to notice. Then the host received a cue through his earpiece. He smiled, adjusted his mic, and walked to center stage. And now, he announced theatrically, we have an unexpected performance, the audience murmured. The judges glanced at each other, puzzled. The host continued, a last-minute participant. Let's see where this goes. The side curtain opened, and two assistants helped the old man walk to the middle of the stage. The audience reacted instantly. Look, that's him! It's the man from the video. Oh my God, they let him in! This is going to be a train wreck. Some laughed, others recorded, others cringed. But there were a few who watched silently, feeling something they couldn't quite name. As he walked, the old man carried the weight of years of invisibility. Every step echoed nights of cold sidewalks, closed doors, and swallowed pride. The stage looked impossibly large, the lights unbearably harsh, the silence unforgiving. The host tried to hide a smirk. Sir, how would you like to be introduced? The old man paused for a moment. A name no longer seemed to matter. He simply answered, call me whatever you like. The crowd burst into laughter. The host continued, clearly entertained. So you're here to sing, is that right? Yes, the old man replied without raising his voice. And what do you expect to receive if you sing well? He drew a slow breath, looked out at the sea of faces, and spoke with a simplicity that cut through all the lights above him. A meal, silence, deeper than any note that would come afterward. For a brief instant, the host lost his playful expression. The judges didn't find it amusing either. It was a sentence that exposed a wound no one wanted to look at. One of the judges, the harshest one, famous for crushing dreams on live TV, leaned toward his microphone. All right, let's see if you're worth listening to. A dramatic pause. You have 10 seconds. Impress us if you can. The audience erupted in laughter again. The old man closed his eyes, slowly, with a sort of reverence. Then the first note came out. Not loud, not forceful, not embellished, just pure. A clean, steady, perfectly tuned note that made the arrogant judge snap his eyes open as if he'd been slapped. The crowd, expecting a disaster, went silent. He held the note, letting the air hum through the theater, as if sketching something invisible in the space around him. Then came the second note, then the third, a simple melody, yet profoundly moving, the kind sung by someone who knew music not as technique, but as shelter. His voice carried the weight of a lifetime, the exhaustion of someone who had suffered deeply, and the fragile beauty of someone who still held something precious inside. A woman in the audience covered her mouth. A streamer accidentally ended his live stream. A producer dropped his headset. The arrogant judge didn't move. It felt as though the music had stopped time. Then, without warning, the old man opened his eyes while singing the hardest verse. And in that instant, it was as if he showed the audience not just his voice, but his entire life. When he reached the end of the section, there were no claps. Not because it wasn't deserved, but because no one could process what had just happened. The first person to snap out of the trance was the arrogant judge. He lifted his hand. Stop, the audience murmured. Sing another part, he said. The old man inhaled deeply and sang again, even better, and in that moment, the entire show shifted, and no one, absolutely no one, was ready for what came next. The old man's second demonstration didn't seem human. Too much power for someone so frail, too much technique for someone who appeared to live on the streets, too much emotion for anyone to sit comfortably, and because of that, discomfort began to spread. The theater was now filled with a strange silence, tense, heavy, almost inappropriate for a show built on noise and excitement. The cameras zoomed in on the arrogant judge's face as he searched for explanations that simply didn't exist. He leaned forward, narrowed his eyes and said, "This doesn't make sense." The microphones caught the sentence perfectly. The old man stood still, waiting, as though he was used to watching people question everything he could do. The judge continued, "I want you to sing the beginning, with your eyes open." His tone dripped with provocation. "I want to see if your voice stays the same." The audience reacted, "Oh, come on! This is ridiculous. Is he serious?" But the old man didn't complain. He lifted his wrinkled face, stared into the blinding lights, and began to sing again. No theatrics, no tricks, no dramatic gestures, just his voice. And it came out once more, clear, steady, resonant, a sound that felt impossible coming from someone whose body was so worn down. Still unsatisfied, the arrogant judge pointed a finger. Again, he sang again. "Now another part," the judge demanded, and he sang another part. "Without the microphone," another judge added, trying to appear impartial. The old man removed the mic from its stand with trembling hands, handed it to the assistant, and took a deep breath. Then he sang for the entire theater with no amplification at all. The audience fell silent, the kind of silence people make when witnessing something sacred. His voice filled the auditorium, as if trying to occupy every hollow space in those walls, and in those people. Even so, when the a cappella ended, the arrogant judge crossed his arms and said, "I don't believe it." The crowd grew furious. "What do you mean you don't believe it? He just sang 3 times. What a miserable man. Show some respect." Outside, social media was erupting. Producers backstage watched the numbers spike in real time, already over 300,000 views. "He's going viral across the whole country. If the judges pull anything unfair here, this will explode." And that's exactly where the real trouble began. The arrogant judge stood up. "I want to see his file," he said in a threatening tone. "Something is off here." The coordinator appeared beside the stage, embarrassed. He leaned in and whispered, "We don't have a full record for him. He got in because of the video. We don't have his information." The judge inhaled sharply, as if confirming his suspicion. "Exactly. This man might be deceiving everyone." The audience erupted into boos. "Absurd! Shame on you! You're being cruel." "He sang perfectly." The old man lowered his head. He didn't look surprised. That reaction was nothing new to him. The arrogant judge didn't let up. It could be playback. It could be lip sync. Someone backstage could be singing for him. He could have rehearsed a whole scam. The theater reacted with growing outrage. "This is ridiculous. How can it be playback if he sang without a microphone? You're terrified of his talent." For the first time since he began singing, the old man answered calmly, "Sir, I have no one to pretend for me. If I wanted to fool you, I wouldn't be asking for a meal. I'd be asking for money." The words struck like thunder. The judges shifted uncomfortably. The production team froze. Every phone continued recording. The arrogant judge, losing control of the situation, snapped back, "Then prove it. Sing another section. The hardest one, the highest note." The audience protested. "Enough! He already proved himself. This is harassment." But the old man lifted his hand gently, asking for silence. And then he sang the exact part no one would dare attempt unprepared. The hardest verse, the highest pitch, the most demanding passage. He hit every note with almost unreal precision. Another judge, the most technical of them, pressed a hand to his chest, an involuntary reaction. It wasn't theatrics, it was genuine disbelief. Yet the arrogant judge persisted. "I don't care for this emotional spectacle," he declared, as if it was simply a matter of taste. "People like him come here just to elicit pity. That's not art." The audience erupted in fury. "He's giving the performance of the night. Show some respect. You don't want talent, you want image. This is what you call fairness?" The old man remained steady, breathing slowly. No arguing, no defending himself, no anger. His calm only irritated the judge further. Finally, the man snapped, "You're only still here because you went viral. If not for that, you'd have been cut at the door." Gasps spread through the crowd. But before anyone could fire back, the old man raised his head and said, "I know." A quiet pause. "But even so, may I sing the entire song?" That question, so simple, so soft, became the spark that changed everything. Because in that moment, the theatre understood he wasn't asking for pity. He wanted to prove himself. And once he did, no one in that room would ever be the same. His request hovered in the air. "May I sing the entire song?" It sounded gentle but carried something profound, as if this might be his only real chance to show the world what he still held inside. The arrogant judge smirked. "The entire song? This isn't an open rehearsal, sir, but—" He leaned forward, intertwining his fingers. "Since you insist so much, and since everyone here seems enchanted by this little story," he mimed quotation marks, "let's see how far this charade goes." The audience booed. The old man remained silent, not out of acceptance, but because he seemed to save his strength only for what mattered: singing. The production coordinator received frantic instructions through his earpiece. "Let him sing," they repeated. "The video is exploding. Don't stop him. Let it happen." The coordinator signaled with his arm. The orchestra started to prepare, but the old man lifted his hand. "No instruments," he said softly. "Just my voice." Coming from someone in worn clothes with trembling hands, it sounded like a challenge no seasoned performer would dare make. The conductor hesitated, then lowered his baton. The audience waited. The entire theatre seemed to breathe as one. The old man stepped forward, inching toward the center of the stage, with the slowness of someone carrying his whole past on his back. He stopped under the main spotlight, which drew his fragile silhouette against the massive backdrop. He inhaled deeply and began. The first line came out gentle but profound. The second carried strength, as though it had traveled across decades to reach that stage. The third held a quiet pain, worn by time but still alive. His voice filled the theatre as if each note carried memories of love, of loss, of nights when no one listened, of dreams crushed before they could bloom. The audience felt it instantly. It didn't sound sung. It sounded confessed. The technical judge leaned forward, mesmerized. "My God," he whispered, unaware his mic was off. The reporter who had mocked him earlier now held her phone with trembling hands, tears sliding down her cheeks without her noticing. The young woman who had filmed everything from the start pressed a hand to her chest, eyes wide. The arrogant judge tried to maintain his mask of disbelief, but his breathing was uneven. The corner of his eye glistened. The song continued. His interpretation defied logic. It wasn't just technique, it was soul. Every difficult run, every long note, every demanding phrase, he executed with such precision that even the best performers there wouldn't match it. At the song's peak, his voice rose. Higher, 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 and just when it seemed it would break, it didn't. He hit the highest note with a steadiness that made the entire audience freeze. The theatre was so silent that a heartbeat would have echoed. The old man held the note, sustaining it as if he were holding the whole world in his hands. Then he descended gently, finishing with a phrase so delicate it felt like a whispered thank you to the music itself. The final echo drifted through the theatre as if it had a life of its own. Then, nothing. No sound. No movement. The audience stood frozen, trying to process what had just unfolded. The old man lowered his head, drained, as if every cell in his body had been emptied. It felt as though he had poured into that song everything he had left in life. After a few endless seconds, someone in the back began to clap. 1, 2, 3, and then the eruption. The entire theatre rose to its feet. Thunderous applause, shouts, people crying, phones raised, recording every moment. The old man lifted his eyes slowly. He looked startled, as though he couldn't believe he was still capable of moving anyone like that. The technical judge discreetly wiped his eyes. The interpretation specialist had his hands clasped in a gesture of respect. The guest judge cried openly, and the arrogant judge was stunned. He couldn't speak, he couldn't blink. He just stared at the stage, as if every argument, every ounce of pride, every certainty he had built his persona on had suddenly collapsed under the weight of that voice. The crowd shouted, "Bravo! Let him win! What an incredible man!" The old man inhaled deeply, and with a humility that almost hurt to witness, spoke into the microphone. "Thank you. I only wanted a plate of food." The crowd fell silent, not out of pity, but because in that instant everyone remembered something they often forget. Talent doesn't choose appearance, age, or circumstance, and dignity should never be something bargained. From that moment on, no one dared to laugh, and the show, which until then had been predictable, had just found its unexpected protagonist. The man who sang for food, but who, in only a few minutes, revealed something no one else on that stage had: a voice capable of silencing the world. The applause was still echoing when he was escorted backstage. He walked slowly, leaning on an assistant who, for the first time that night, no longer handled him like a nuisance. There was respect in the way they touched him now, and maybe a touch of guilt. With each step they took behind the curtain, more people appeared. Cameramen, producers, directors, reporters, all hungry to turn that moment into another piece of profitable spectacle. It was striking how quickly the world changed its tone once someone became valuable. As soon as the old man sat on a simple chair, 3 producers circled him like hawks around a rare trophy. "Sir, we need you to say a few short lines for our cameras, all right?" one of them asked, smiling far too wide to be sincere. "Lines?" the old man repeated, confused. Yes. Stuff like, 'Never give up on your dreams. I always knew I'd get here,' that kind of thing." The producer waved his hands theatrically. Another chimed in. "And we also need you to share a sad story. Something tragic, abandonment, illness, anything that builds emotional connection." The old man frowned, uneasy. "I just came to sing." The producer let out a stiff, empty laugh. Yes, of course. But now the audience wants to know more about you. Something touching, you know." He winked at another producer who was already recording. The old man looked at the cameras, then quickly looked away. He didn't like any of this. But before he could answer, a director rushed in. "Guys, stop trying to squeeze anything out of him now. We need to organize the press briefing. This story is blowing up," he said breathlessly. "And we need to control the narrative." Control the narrative. The words hung in the air like something foul. Sitting quietly, the old man watched everything unfold. He had the strangest feeling, as if they were trying to claim him, as if his voice had stopped being an expression of his soul and had become a product. The director continued, "And we also need to figure out how to fit him into the semi-finals. We have contracts with brands that want performers who are young, modern, you know. He doesn't match the program's profile." The old man lifted his head. I can still sing, can't I?" he asked softly. The director hesitated. A producer answered for him, "That depends. If we adjust the story so the audience reacts well, if it sells, if it engages." That sentence sliced through the air. If it sells, as if the artist were the least important part of the equation. Just then, the young woman from the audience burst into the backstage area, holding her phone. "You're not getting it," she said, breathless. "People are defending him. Look at this." She held the screen toward them. The video showed hashtags climbing, thousands of comments, live streams discussing the injustice, people begging the show to respect the old man, urging them not to twist his story for views. One producer turned pale. "If the public is reacting like this," he murmured, "we have to take him to the semi-finals." Another protested, "But the sponsors want young faces. Look at the brand brief. Look at what they want for the finale." The coordinator wiped sweat from his forehead. "If we cut him now, this becomes a national scandal." The old man watched them argue as if they were speaking about an object. not a person. Then he slowly stood up. "May I say something?" he asked, voice trembling. Everything stopped. They all went silent, as if suddenly remembering he existed. "I don't need an interview. I don't need a made-up story. I don't need to be turned into marketing," he said with painful simplicity. The director opened his mouth to respond, but the old man gently raised a hand to stop him. "Just let me sing again. If I'm meant to stay, that's all I ask." The honesty in his voice shattered every argument around him, but backstage isn't guided by honesty. It's guided by interests. The producer exchanged a look with the coordinator. "We need to see if this pulls numbers. If it does, he stays. If not, it's hard to justify," he muttered, speaking about the old man as if he weren't standing right there. The young woman from the audience couldn't contain herself. "Do you hear yourselves?" she snapped, her voice trembling with indignation. "He just moved an entire theater to tears, and all you talk about is contracts, appearances, and profile. What profile do you want? Someone flawless? He's not good enough just because he doesn't wear a fancy outfit." The silence that followed was stifling, and then, in the middle of that mess, something even worse happened. The director received an urgent message through his earpiece, his face drained of color. "Guys," he said, visibly shaken, "I just got word they're trying to cancel his registration officially." The young woman's eyes widened. "What do you mean? He passed. Everyone saw it." The director exhaled shakily. "They're claiming he came in without complete documentation, that he has no formal record, that we don't have his information. They're trying to use that to remove him from the show." The old man lowered his head. "Then, I'll leave," he said, resigned. "I don't want to cause trouble." The young woman grabbed his arm. "You're not going anywhere. The public is with you." The producers gathered in a corner. The discussion escalated. Some wanted to remove him quietly. Others wanted to keep him to squeeze every drop of benefit. The manipulation was blatant, the injustice undeniable. But now the entire country was watching, and something unexpected began happening online. Thousands of people wrote, "If they cut him, I stop watching the show. Let the old man sing in the semi-final. He won the episode. We want justice." Notifications poured non-stop. The show was now trapped by its own audience. The old man, sitting quietly again, watched it all with a sad, calm heaviness, and for the first time in a long time, things started to shift. Not because the production wanted it, but because they had no choice. That man, invisible for years, now had a whole nation looking his way, and that could no longer be ignored. What would come in the semi-final wouldn't be just a performance, it would be a battle, and he had survived battles far harsher than this. The days leading up to the semi-final passed in a whirlwind. The entire country debated the mysterious old man from the show. Newspapers, independent channels, commentators, huge online profiles, everyone dissected every detail of his performance. Meanwhile, backstage, the team was split between two forces, the public demanding justice and the sponsors demanding a more marketable image. The old man, untouched by the chaos, stayed in a small corner that had been set up for him. The makeup crew tried to prepare him, but he gently refused. "I don't want to look like someone else. I just want to sing the way I've always sung." Some producers were annoyed by that, others were moved. But it didn't matter. He was the centerpiece of the event now, whether the production liked it or not. When semi-final night arrived, the theater was packed with people who came for one reason, to see him return. Everyone felt it. For the first time in years, the judges looked nervous. And for the first time ever, the host walked on stage without his overly rehearsed smile. The lights came up. The host drew a deep breath and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, the moment everyone has been waiting for." The audience erupted into applause before he even said the name. "With you all, the contestant who moved the entire country." A spotlight lit the side of the stage. "The man who reminded us that talent has no age, no look, no label." The crowd roared, rose to its feet. "He's back, and he's ready." The host stepped aside. "Ladies and gentlemen, him." The old man walked in slowly, but with dignity. His simple posture, his worn coat, the wrinkled registration slip in his hand, everything about him seemed to say, "This is who I am. I don't hide." And paradoxically, that honesty made people admire him even more. The moment he stepped on stage, the entire theater stood, a standing ovation, long, deafening, voices echoing like waves. "Bravo! Sing for us. We love you, sir." The old man froze for a few seconds. Then he bowed his head, emotional, unable to hide the shine in his eyes. The judges, however, were tense. The arrogant judge kept his face stiff, trying not to be swallowed by the moment. The other two carried a mix of expectation and guilt. They knew they had underestimated someone who deserved far more respect than he'd been given. The host approached with the microphone. "Are you ready?" "I am." "What will you sing today?" The old man lifted his face and said something no one expected. "The same song." A wave of murmurs swept through the theater. "The same one?" the host echoed, surprised. The old man smiled. "Yes, but this time I won't be singing alone." The entire theater held its breath. The conductor, already in position, raised his baton. The orchestra adjusted their music sheets. The atmosphere shifted. This wasn't just a performance anymore. It was an event. The technical judge's eyes widened. "He's going to sing with the orchestra." The host gave a small, confirming nod. Yes, that was exactly what was about to happen. The entire orchestra was at his command. When the conductor gave the first cue, the music began softly, a musical carpet unfolding beneath the old man's feet. Violins slipped in one after another, followed by violas, cellos, and winds, opening a grand landscape for the voice the entire country was waiting to hear. The old man closed his eyes, and he sang. But this time, it wasn't the voice of someone fighting for a meal. It was the voice of someone reclaiming something he'd lost long ago. His interpretation was monumental. Every note felt like it was stitching pieces of his soul back together. The orchestra responded as if it were a living creature breathing with him. People in the audience began crying without even noticing. The most difficult passage, the same one that had intimidated the judges before, came out stronger, deeper, as if it were his very essence shouting, "I exist, I always existed, you just didn't see me." At the judges' table, the arrogant one tried to maintain his composure, but failed. His jaw trembled. His eyes shimmered. His fist clenched in a futile attempt to hold himself together. In the middle of the audience, the young woman who had filmed the first video cried openly, holding her phone but no longer recording, just feeling. The music rose toward its peak. In the final verse, the old man lifted his head, opened his eyes, and looked directly at the crowd, as if saying, "Thank you for letting me exist here." And then, the last note, long, powerful, perfect. When it ended, the silence lasted less than a second, because the theater, everyone, absolutely everyone, erupted. It was the biggest applause in the show's history, a roar, a wave, a celebration, people screaming, crying, jumping to their feet, hugging strangers. It felt like a World Cup final. The old man brought his hands to his face. He had never received anything like this. He had never been seen like this. The technical judge slammed the approval button before the song even finished. The interpretation judge followed, and then the arrogant judge, unable to hide what he felt, pressed his button slowly, head bowed, in respect. The old man dropped to his knees on stage, crying silently, and everyone knew. This man had just turned a talent show into a lesson on human dignity, and no one, absolutely no one, left that night the same. The semi-final ended like a cultural earthquake. Social media exploded. Videos of his performance took over every platform. And for the first time in the show's history, the country's #1 trending topic wasn't a scandal or a celebrity or a silly viral. It was an anonymous old man who had sung like a giant. People wanted to know who he was, where he came from, why he lived on the streets, what had happened. But the old man refused interviews, refused videos, refused invitations, asked for nothing. He simply sat in a quiet corner backstage, like someone who could finally breathe after years underwater. Until, the next morning, one of the more empathetic producers, one of the few who didn't treat him like a commodity, approached with a trembling tablet in her hands. "Sir, I think you need to see this." He hesitated. She insisted, placing the device in his hands. It was an old video, very old, grainy recording, blurry image. And there he was, decades younger, dressed impeccably, standing tall, with the same unmistakable voice, singing before a massive audience. Singing like a seasoned professional. The name of the show on the corner of the video revealed everything. The old man exhaled slowly, his eyes filled with tears. "I thought they had erased all of it," he whispered. The producer swallowed hard. "They didn't. They found it, and people are saying you disappeared right after this show, that you never performed again. No one ever knew why." He closed his eyes for a moment, holding back a memory too heavy to lift. "I lost my family that year," he said, voice cracking. "I lost everything, and when loss is big enough, you lose your voice with it. Then your will. Then you disappear." The producer felt the weight of his words. "But you sang again," she said softly, "and the whole country heard you." He gave a sad smile. "I wasn't singing for the country. I was singing to prove to myself that I was still alive." As the final approached, the machinery of the show went into overdrive. Sponsors tried to meddle. Producers wanted to turn his story into even bigger spectacle. The entire program became a battlefield of interests. But one thing was certain. No one dared remove him from the final. Not after what he had done. Not after what the public had witnessed. Not with what was still to come. Final night arrived. Cameras everywhere. Fireworks, a packed theater. The judges looked ready for something historic. The old man was called to the stage with applause, as thunderous as in the semi-final. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, someone walked in slowly. A woman. Grey hair, eyes filled with tears. The audience held its breath. The old man turned, and when he saw who it was, he collapsed. He fell into her arms like a lost child who had finally found home. The entire theater was moved, even without understanding. Then the host explained, "This is the person who's been searching for him for years. She saw the video, recognized the voice, and came. She is his sister." The theater fell silent, a devastating silence. Then it exploded into applause. His sister held his face gently. "I thought I'd lost you forever," she whispered through tears. "But your voice, I would know it anywhere." He cried in silence, unable to speak. It was the first time in decades that he wasn't alone. The final performance began. But that night he didn't sing to survive, not to prove anything, not for victory. He sang like someone who had finally reclaimed a part of himself he once believed was gone. The orchestra followed him, the audience followed him, and he sang as if he were giving back to the world every bit of life he had kept buried inside his chest. When the song ended, the theater rose to its feet again. Judges moved to tears, people hugging, people weeping. Then came the final announcement. The host opened the envelope and said what everyone already knew. "The grand winner is him." More applause, more shouting, more tears. But the old man didn't celebrate like the others. He simply smiled. A quiet, gentle smile no one understood at first. It was the smile of someone who had already won long before his name was called, because winning the prize mattered. But finding his family again, being seen, being heard, being respected, was infinitely greater. And as he lifted the trophy, holding his sister's hand, it became clear to everyone, this story wasn't about talent. It was about dignity, about rebirth, about being remembered, and no one would ever dare treat him as invisible again. The theater was still applauding as the lights began to fade. The old man stood there, holding the trophy in one hand and his sister's in the other. But anyone looking at him could tell the prize was just a symbol. What truly mattered was the dignity restored, the life regained, the voice rediscovered. And there, in that moment, everyone understood a truth we rarely acknowledge. None of us knows the weight another person carries, yet we judge so easily, by clothing, by exhaustion, by silence, when we shouldn't judge at all. He had sung for a meal, but what he gave us was humanity. And if you made it this far, maybe you felt the same tightness in your chest, that mix of outrage, hope, and the desire to become a better person. So tell me, what did this story awaken in you? Share it below. I want to hear your thoughts, your interpretation, what touched you. And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a like so this message can reach more people. We'll see each other in the next story.